Good morning. My name is Lori Seeley. I'm the Director of Performance Management. Welcome to the Performance Management Training Workshop for Managers and Supervisors in S.M.A.R.T training. So this is a two-part training session. And during the first session, we're going to highlight specific requirements for HUD's performance management appraisal system and our performance management framework. And during the second session, we're going to have a hands-on workshop where you can actually walk through a real example of a manager's strategic goals and the specific S.M.A.R.T standards that you can develop for that manager or employee. So today I'd like to introduce John Anderson, who is my special assistant, and Robin Johnson's going to come up later to talk about the S.M.A.R.T performance standards, writing S.M.A.R.T standards. So John?
Good afternoon, everyone. We certainly appreciate your attendance today. This is, as Lori said, performance management training for managers and supervisors. It's a mandatory training course, and it complies with the government's mandate that all managers be trained on performance in the workplace. The training is being provided to new managers and supervisors joining the department on a quarterly basis, and Encompass and S.M.A.R.T training will be provided to new supervisors every 60 days after their entry on duty. Every 3 years, all managers and supervisors will be required to do a refresher training in performance management. Last but not least, managing performance is one of the primary tasks of a manager. Our training objectives. Number one, review HUD's performance management framework, requirements for EPIs, as we call them generally, and PACs, and evaluate the importance of communicating performance standards and monitoring performance in your respective work units. The Office of the Performance Management Officer. Well, what does that office do? First, that office is responsible for administering the performance management framework for the department by ensuring full and accurate oversight of the performance management process and the implementation of the performance management framework annually from October 1 through September 30th, and to ensure that both EPIs and PACs employees are familiar with HUD's performance management requirements. Performance management. What is performance management? First of all, it's planning, work, and setting expectations that are aligned with agency goals. Continuous monitoring of performance. Developing within your employees and work unit the capacity to perform. Also, rewarding results-based performance. Managing performance is one of the primary tasks of a manager. HUD's performance framework is what we're showing here. First of all, as most of you know, we have 4 different performance management systems here at HUD. Today, we are concentrating on PACs and EPIs. As you can see from the chart, PACs and EPIs do have several elements in common. The performance plan, establishing the performance plan. What belongs in every performance plan? First of all, 5 elements, no more, no less. We have, over the past few years, tried to make sure that plans have no more than 5 elements. At one point, we had plans that had 6, 7, 8, I've seen as many as 9 elements. For uniformity and to comply with the performance management framework, we are asking, and it's in our requirements, that all plans have only 5. 3 of those 5 elements should be programmatic elements. Those elements are specific to your organization. 3 of those 5 elements should be SMART, which equates to 60% SMART. 2 of those elements are mandatory elements: collaboration and personal investment. All elements should be aligned with a strategic goal. Previous years, we aligned only 1 element, but going forward in FY18, we are aligning all elements with a strategic goal. The plan, once developed, must be approved and communicated to the employee within the first 30 days of the appraisal period. A standard must be written for each critical element. And of course, everyone knows what a critical element is or how it fits into the plan. But for each performance plan, you have 5 elements. Here at HUD, all 5 of those elements are critical elements. Under each element, you are required to write standards. Those standards should express how well an employee must perform to be appraised at each of the levels. Every manager needs an appropriate monitoring process. Performance management system. First, you have HUD's strategic plan. It contains the department's goals. And then you have HUD's annual performance plan, generally called the APP. All program goals must align with the goals that are set in the APP. Then you have our EPECs, senior executives who are responsible for setting goals that will produce outcomes. PACS managers are responsible for outputs. EPIs, responsible for work unit production, customer service. In other words, where the rubber meets the road. A little quick knowledge check. Who is responsible for establishing the performance plan? Anybody want to take a stab at that one? Managers, thank you. Which phase in the performance management process requires completion within the first 30 days? Thoughts? One more time, please.
Approving the plan and communicating it to the employee.
Yes, thank you. How many elements must an employee have? 5, thank you. How many elements should be aligned to a strategic goal? It's a little tricky now because we changed it. All of them, thank you. Table in the back. Thank you very much. What are the 2 mandatory elements for EPIs and PACs? Everybody has them. Thank you. If you don't have those 2 mandatory elements, please ensure you have them before the end of the fiscal year. Answers: the manager, employee's performance plan, 5, and the number of 5 again. Personal investment and collaboration. Pretty easy questions, huh? Thank you. SMART goals. What are SMART goals? Well, SMART stands for specific, which means to state in clear and concise terms. Measurable, that is quantifiable. And achievable. Of course, achievable has to be realistic within the constraints of your office, your budget, your resources. Relevant is important to you and your organization. Your goals. Time bound, target date. When is the performance due? SMART goal tips. Please refrain from using absolute measures. Absolute measures are measures that require 100% rather than excellence. Standards that require absolute or use absolute value are considered to be all or nothing as far as the Merit System Protection Board and many employees. And it sets an employee up for failure. So standards written on an all or nothing approach are prohibited. And the United States Systems Merit Protection Board bars absolute standards unless the failure to use those absolute standards result in death, injury, breach of international security, or great monetary loss. Only under those circumstances should you require your employees to perform at 100%. Please place measures in your standards. A lot of standards we review have, most of the time, usually, consistently, always, normally, generally. Problem with that? Very difficult to determine if the performance has actually been rendered. The employee will say, yeah, I did that most of the time. What can you say? I consistently did it. Hard to counter. I normally did it. Once again, very debatable. We have two examples here. And in each example, and these are actually real examples from performance plans. If you notice in example number 1, the employee reviews 100% of DRA proposals and conducts site, neighborhood visits, and assessments for a signed transaction. And it goes on and on. But the problem we have with this standard is it requires 100%, which is an absolute measure, which is prohibited. Example 2, employee conducts on-site evaluations of 100% of assigned PFA offices in FY15 and submits report. It goes on and on, but also an absolute standard, which is prohibited. So please refrain from using absolute measures. What's our goal? Communication. Regular goal discussion with your employees, with your team, feedback, coaching, one-on-ones, as we call them now, employee engagement. Those things produce engaged employees. Knowledge check. Which standard meets the S.M.A.R.T criteria? We have respond to every home emergency safety situation within multifamily housing units inside of 12 hours. B says respond to home emergencies within 12 hours, 90% of the time, with no outstanding responses over 18 hours. Show of hands or individual response? Yes. B. Okay. Well, great responses. Correct answer is B. If you notice, B is it's more specific, relevant, time-bound. It's SMART. Mid-year progress review, This is required at the midpoint of every appraisal cycle. It's an opportunity for the manager to provide feedback to his or her employees. We recommend strongly a face-to-face meeting. Now, I know you supervise employees in the field, but we ask that you avail yourselves of the technology that we have, VTC and Skype, and try to do a face-to-face with your employee. Self-assessments. Employee self-assessments should be reviewed and considered by the manager. Oftentimes we hear from employees, they didn't even read my self-assessment. So please consider the self-assessment. It's not required, but it should be encouraged by each manager from his employee. The goal of the meeting is to review the employee's progress towards achieving the established performance standards that you and the employee agreed to at the beginning of the year when you established the plan. This is just a progress review, so it's very critical. This is also an opportunity for a manager to modify a performance plan if needed. Sometimes you may run into a situation where your priorities have changed from the onset of the fiscal year or the quarter, and you're now focusing on this and this exclusively. Well, at mid-year, you can modify the plan to reflect that. Because the bottom line is you want to be able to rate the employee on what the employee is doing. So sometimes a modification is necessary. This is a perfect time to modify. Now, if you determine that the performance is not fully successful, as a manager, you have an obligation to discuss the performance, provide meaningful feedback to the employee relating to any deficiency, outline the expectations going forward, provide assistance, training to correct or help the employee perform. You should conduct, and we recommend, feedback discussions with your employees every quarter, at least once. Meeting tips for mid-year: please do not meet with your employees at his or her desk, at the water cooler, in the snack bar, in the hallway, in the bathroom. You should meet with your employee in a well-lit private room, conference room, or your office, if your office has a door, nicely enclosed. And the employee should be encouraged to bring a list of his or her accomplishments. Granted, you know a lot of things that your employee has done, but you don't know everything that your employee has done. And it's important that you know everything that your employee has done so that you can rate the employee's performance. You as a manager must set the tone for this mid-year meeting. It is your duty to meet with this employee. So you must set the tone. So when I say set the tone, you must present to the employee in a calm and professional manner, recognizing that this type of feedback engages employees and promotes employee engagement. Excuse me. Once again, if there is a problem with employees' performance, you need to take some steps. Consulting with your local employee relations specialist or representative is advisable. Knowledge check, once again. A performance plan must be at least 50% SMART. So that means if it's 50% SMART, what are we saying? Is that correct? It's not. 60%, I heard the right answer. Thank you. What do the letters in SMART stand for? I heard right answers coming from the front. Thank you. Is a self-assessment required of each employee? But, help me out, encourage. Will the employee receive a summary rating during the mid-year process? I have varying answers. Employee would not receive a summary rating during the mid-year process. The summary rating is generally given at the end of the year. However, we have multiple unions here, and each of those contracts do come a little differently, but for the majority of our employees who are under AFGE, it is not a requirement. Does an unacceptable rating prevent an employee from receiving a step increase or career ladder promotion? Unacceptable. Did I hear yes? Did I hear no? Okay. Everybody is right out here. I may not do any more questions. Answers. Performance plan must be 60% SMART. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound. SMART. Self-assessments cannot be required. No is the answer to that one, and yes. Performance appraisal. What is it? Well, the appraisal is the rating of the employee. There's a lot of emotion there. The employee is emotional, trying to figure out and anticipate the feedback that you, as a manager, will give him in regards to his work products. The employee is concerned. He's engaged with the manager to discern the outcome of his final rating. The product, the employee's work product. The manager must evaluate the employee's work product. The annual performance appraisal is the annual rating of record for the employee's performance for the entire year. The manager must evaluate the employee's performance against the elements in the plan and the standards in the plan. Once again, a self-assessment from an employee should be encouraged and should be acknowledged. The annual rating of record for an employee must be discussed and finalized. Advise the employee of any performance problem prior to providing the rating. Talk to your employee about his or her performance. Now, if one of the elements in the performance plan is rated level 1, which is unacceptable, the summary rating for that employee is level 1, unacceptable. An unacceptable performance rating prevents employees from receiving step increases, performance awards, and other rewards. I left out career ladder, promotions. The failure to be acceptable and unacceptable prevents you from giving an employee those types of rewards: steps increases, career ladder promotions, or performance award. Employees that are on a personal improvement plan, performance improvement plan, or an opportunity to improve plan are removed from the performance management process. Summary rating guide. This is just for informational purposes. For an outstanding rating, the system gives 3 points. That's a critical element rated level 5. The numeric rating is arranged between 2.75 or higher. Excellent. 2 points for each critical element rated level 4. The range is 1.80 to 2.74. Fully successful, 1 point for each critical element rated level 3. The numeric rating, 1.79 or lower. Anything lower than fully successful does not lend way to any points for the employee. This is a sample performance rating calculation on the board, on the screen. If you notice, we have the two mandatory elements, personal investment and collaboration. The employee received level 4, which is excellent. Some people say highly successful. 2 points for each one of those. He has 3 books of business. He's rated level 1 on one of the book of businesses for 1 point. He's rated on the second book of business, level 5, which is outstanding, for 3 points. And on the 5th, level 3, which is fully successful, 1 point. So you have a total of 9 points. 9 divided by 5 equals 1.80. It falls in the range for excellent rating, level 4, the range being 1.80 to 2.74. Of course, the system does the calculation for you, but we just wanted to show you how it translates. You can do it as well if you like. This would be the way to compute it. Exceptions to the ratings. If one or more element is rated level 1, the summary rating being unacceptable. The reason we list these is because initially when you put this into the system does not actually pick this up or display this. This is subsequently done manually in the system. So once you put that in the system, do not be dismayed. Give it about 24 to 48 hours. Look at it again. And if it's not there then, please contact the Performance Management Office and we will assist you. No elements are rated level 1. 2 or more elements are rated level 2. Summary rating will be marginally successful. Once again, the system may not pick it up when you put it in. Just monitor it to see. 1 element is rated level 2. No elements are rated level 1. That lends way to a level 3 fully successful rating. All elements rated level 1 or 2 must adhere to what we have here. So if you give that, if you don't see that in the system once you do it, please contact us once you have waited if that does not appear. This is where you don't want to be. We've got 2 people with problems. One is the manager and one is the supervisor. Your guess is better than mine. Delayed ratings. A manager may issue a delayed rating if any of the following circumstances exists. The employee has not worked under a performance plan for 90 days. Results in a delayed rating. Sufficient performance information does not exist for a new supervisor to rate the employee. Delayed rating. The employee is on a PIP or OIP. Delayed rating. The employee's performance is temporarily at a level 1 or 2 due to illness or other extenuating circumstances. Delayed rating. The employee has been performing at level 1 or 2. He's been demoted, reassigned to another position. Delayed rating. The last date for you as a manager to establish a delayed rating in any fiscal year is September 1. And if you do a delayed rating, the final rating should be issued 90 days afterwards. You should conduct a mid-year review with this employee halfway through the 90-day period. 45 days, you should be talking with this employee in regards to a review. If the employee's performance is below fully successful, Please contact your employee labor relations representative in your region or in headquarters, depending on where you're domiciled. Employee rewards. A major part of a manager's duty is to reward the employee for performance if merited. Performance at HUD is awarded at the fully successful level and above. It is your responsibility and duty as a manager to discern, is this employee eligible for a quote-unquote performance award? You must discern the applicable time frame in which to push this award forward for the employee and determine what award is the employee eligible for. Please submit your documentation timely or in accordance with the memorandum and guidance issued by the Office of Performance Management so that the employee's award will be received timely. Got a few more questions for you. At what point in the fiscal year is the annual appraisal due? I heard something, but I don't know if it was the right answer. But we're talking about the annual appraisal. Everybody does an annual appraisal for their employees when? I think I heard somebody say the end of the year, which would be correct. Should the manager finalize and convey the year-end rating without talking to the employee? Thank you. That's very important. You got that. Who determines if a delayed rating is appropriate? The manager. Only you can determine if the employee should be given a delayed rating. Are any points earned for a marginal or unsuccessful element rating? 0. Thank you. What is the manager's role in the award process? Did I hear the answer again? It was very low. Well, the first one, annual performance appraisals due 30 to 45 days after the end of the rating cycle. I heard that answer. Managers should meet with the employee face-to-face if possible to discuss the rating before finalizing it in the system. I think I heard that answer also from someone. The manager with the advice of employee relations. 0, I definitely heard that one. Manager nominates and approves the employee for a reward and prepares the justification. You will not be able to award this employee without writing a justification. And our office does provide guidance on writing a justification, and we also review each and every award to see if an appropriate justification has been rendered, and we will let you know if there are any problems. Poor performance. Do you have a poor performer? Maybe. Well, how do you identify? Well, first of all, you want to identify performance problems as soon as they arise. You want to communicate your expectations and maintain documentation of performance deficiencies. How do you deal with performance problems? That is the question, right? Well, first you must determine, is it performance or is it conduct? Manager notices a problem with the employee's work product. Is it that the employee can't do it, or is it the employee will not do it? Therein lies the answer to the question. If the employee just will not do it, you know the employee can do it, but he just won't do it. You've seen him do it before, maybe first quarter, maybe last year, but he won't do it now. That's generally conduct. The employee's working hard and you know the employee's working hard, and you talk with the employee, and the employee said, I'm doing it, I'm going to do it, I understand, but he or she just can't do it, just can't seem to get it, that's performance. You must identify if it's performance or conduct and implement the appropriate training and development plan. Why do we have poor performers? Well, can't really answer it fully, but I can give you a few reasons. You have the wrong match of person for the job. You may have health problems. The employee could lack the mental capacity to do that particular job. Please consult with your employee relations specialist if you have poor performance, and they will assist you. Authorities and references, we reference the CFR 5, CFR Part 430, governs performance in the federal sector. HUD's management plan, that's our performance management policy and plan. Most of you probably have a copy of it. It's certainly available on the intranet. The Performance Management Desk Guide, which is issued by the Office of Performance Management, a very good document with a lot of great tips on performance. Also available on the intranet, on the web, under Performance Management, under OCHICO, it's there. The union collective bargaining agreements. We strongly recommend if you have AFG employees that you have a copy of the AFGE agreement, because sometimes that will impact how you can deal with an employee. If you have a NEFI employee, please have a copy of the NEFI agreement. That concludes the performance management portion of this training. Are there any questions? Thank you for being a wonderful audience.
One question? All right, thank you, John, for a fantastic overview of the performance requirements. Okay. And now I'm going to introduce Robin Johnson, and she's going to walk us through the S.M.A.R.T workshop. So we may ask some of you to come together on tables because this is a hands-on exercise, and it might help to be in a little bit larger group if it's just a couple of you. It's up to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Robin Johnson. I work in the Office of Performance Management with Lori and John. John and I work pretty close together when we do these trainings and in terms of putting the presentations and things together. We answer a lot of questions online, through phone calls. So, you know, of course, once all of this is done, if you have any additional questions, feel free to contact either one of us in the Office of Performance Management. Okay, so this session is dealing with S.M.A.R.T standards. So John went over it a little bit in terms of what the S.M.A.R.T is, what the acronyms mean. So we're just kind of delve a little bit into how to write a performance standard using or making your performance standards for your employees smart. So, okay, so we'll start with the learning objectives, of course, explaining the elements of SMART performance, the learning practical experience writing performance standards. Now, I will tell you we probably won't get too deep into it. We'll do probably 1 or 2 exercises at the end, because generally this class would take about good 4 hours or so. In addition to the performance management class, we used to do it, and it would take a full day. So, you know, the SMART piece of it is a little bit more detailed, where you actually have to look at a performance plan to, you know, break it down. We would ask you to bring samples from your office, you know, of performance standards that you already have put in place to kind of help you make them, you know, smart, like we're asking you to do, which would be 60% of the performance plan. As he indicated, there are 5 elements, and of those 5, at least 3 would have to be SMART. And we also do an audit every year. Is it every other year? I think it's every other year, to determine whether or not, you know, the department is getting on board with that, because we are actually required to do that as part of our performance management system. So we'll also provide you with some tools at the end, some other resources that you can use once you leave this class. You know, like I said, phone numbers, people you can get in touch with, some other words that you can use, verbs, and those sort of things. And we'll reach that when we get to the end of the training. Okay. The background. Again, 60% of the performance plans the performance standards need to be SMART. HUD's goal is to ensure that performance plans are focused on results. And as we go, if you don't already know, we consider ourselves a results-oriented organization, meaning that, you know, when you're given a performance standard or your performance elements, the expectation is that at the end you will get a result based on your discussion with your manager at the beginning of the year. So the way we ended up having to do this, these courses is that OPM they audit our office every year, and as a result, we have to provide them with samples of our performance plans from each program office. We usually do maybe like a 10% sample, random sample of the performance plans that we have in place. And what they'll do is they'll go through and see if we are actually, you know, putting this information out for the SMART standards to make sure that the department is in compliance with that. So year before last, I think it was 2015, when they did the audit, we didn't do quite as good as we had liked to. A lot of our plans did not have distinctions in the rating levels, meaning, you know, a clear distinction between someone getting a fully versus someone getting an excellent and an outstanding level ratings. Also, now we're finding that a lot of our plans are not completely aligned either. So we're still kind of pushing, you know, some of those things through as we go through our audit. And we're seeing some improvement in our performance plans so far, but this is a way to help managers, you know, get that education and understand what SMART is and why it's required. Okay, so the recommended actions was to ensure that the plans contain credible measures. Of course, that would be based on the performance ratings. Assess the implementation of the SMART initiative at HUD, so determine whether or not our system is actually working. The solution is to ensure that managers understand SMART methodology, just as I said, through trainings like this. We also occasionally will come to program offices when we're requested to do a group training. We've done that a couple of times with multifamily housing, Jenny May, and a couple of other offices, just to kind of do a group setting so that everyone would, being in the same program office, pretty much understanding what the goal is for that agency or that organization, and then breaking it down by positions. So we also, to provide you with the solutions of practical skills and implementing the development of performance standards. So that's what we're going to try and get through today. So I do have one question before we go any further, just so I know the audience. Have any of you actually written a performance standard and actually added SMART to it? Okay, that's good. All right. Okay, so we're going to just go back over real brief because I want to have more time at the end. Again, and I think you guys got this anyway, so the spell out of SMART is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound, and I think I heard you all pretty much got that on the beginning. Okay, so SMART standards were actually introduced to HUD in October 2006. And as a result of pushing that out, you know, we always are trying to figure out what we can do to make it better so that you understand better, So at the end, I will ask you, your program office, and if you think, if they're of all of your managers, what your opinion is or your solution or comments on ways that we can maybe make this better and help other managers understand, maybe, like I said, come into your program office at some point. So please keep that in mind. Okay, on page 12, I believe, on your book, we're just going to kind of break down SMART again. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but this will help you at the end when we actually try to do a sample performance plan, okay? So these questions are going to help you even when you get back to your office in terms of what you're going to look for when you want to find out whether or not a performance plan has a specific element in it. So specifically, for specific, it clearly defines what the employee will accomplish. The results should be the central focus of each element. So every element should have a result. So the questions you would ask if you're trying to look at a performance plan or a performance element to determine whether or not it is specific or if it has a specific element within it is what will be accomplished at the end? What specific results are expected of the employee this rating cycle? So what are you expecting at the end? Okay, an example of one of the elements or the standards that we've looked at. This was a specific piece that came out of a performance plan. Employee will utilize the CPD grant management system, including CPD risk analysis and GMPR process to prepare for and participate in on-site monitoring visits to ensure program compliance. That particular piece there would be considered somewhat specific. Not specific, in which we were seeing a lot of this before, and like I said, we're getting better, is that employee will prepare and participate in on-site monitoring. So that's not specific. It's not telling you exactly where or, what they're supposed to be doing. Okay, sorry about that. It's a little hot up here. Okay, so measurable. The standards should include clearly defined measures. It will look like and how these goals will be measured. The supervisor should communicate how the results will be determined. So really, as a manager, it's your job to know basically what it is that you want that person to do, what the results will look like, and together, you and the employee will determine how you're going to get there. So that's why we push having that face-to-face conversation at the beginning of the year for establishing a performance plan. The questions, and these are the important pieces right here to help you understand or identify the measures, is how will the employee know the requirement is achieved. They have to know what they have to achieve in order to achieve it. How the employee will know he or she did a good job. In other words, if they completed it on time, if they completed the widgets or whatever the measures may be, and can the results be determined, which it should be. Okay, so the questions to consider also continue would be, what is the evidence, and does the standard measure quality, quantity, or cost effectiveness? Those are some of the measures that you should be looking at. And that should probably be in your performance standard as well. Okay, an example, again, we have this grant management system, and it actually on this one it is adding a measure, and this is the same one from the beginning when we started with SMART, with specific compliance of 75% grantees. So that's the measure. What would not be a measure, and a good example, is the employee will ensure program compliance. Well, it doesn't say, how much. Of course, you have to give the employee an understanding of how much they have to do in order to reach that goal or to reach that measurement. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, can you use the mic? Is it on? Yeah.
How is that achievable? It says the employee will ensure program compliance of 75% of grantees.
Are you from CPD?
No.
Oh, okay. No,
The
we get
employee can't make the grantee compliant.
okay, so let me give you, what would this be called? Let me give you something to think about. Okay, so these performance standards or these examples are purely examples. That's why I asked you from CPD, because we had a lot of folks who said it's not measurable. So we're going to use this just as a baseline measure, okay, or a baseline performance standard to complete this as far as measurements, being specific, relevant, and all of that. So to answer that question, I don't really have the answer right at the moment, but we've been asked that a lot of times when we've been doing these trainings. And one of the things that we will do is probably revise this just so that it can be more specific to a specific position. Now, the thing we have to remember is that everyone doesn't know what CPD does, or a CPD rep, or whatever the positions are in that particular program office. That's why I asked if you were from CPD, because I got a lot of those questions from folks in CPD. So I would say if you can just work with me, okay? We're trying to really identify the differences or identify these particular areas within S.M.A.R.T. Is that okay? Okay. Any other questions? I'm sorry, can you use the mic? Yeah.
I was going to say, in addition to what he was saying, I think the question is, what would be an example of a measurable standard?
Well, this right here, compliance with 75%, that's a measure. That's what we're trying to get you to understand, that the measures of a performance standard, if you're going to do specific, and we're trying to actually identify or lay out what each one of these would consist of. So specific meaning, like here it talked about specifically, let me see. It identified what the employee will accomplish, the results of what the employee will be focused on for each element. So when you talk about specific, you're talking about the focus of that one particular element. So does everybody know the difference between elements and the standards? Does anyone know the difference between the two? If someone does, I would appreciate it if you could come up to the mic. Okay, so, all right, so the performance element is the description of what it is you have to do. It could be the collaboration. We have one called collaboration. We also have one called personal investment. We have, what is it? Book of business. Matter of fact, we have two, book of business and APG. So that would be your performance element. The performance standards are the things that you have underneath that tell you what you have to do at the fully, the excellent level, the outstanding level, and also the two below. We don't really like to talk about those two too much, but from the fully to all the way up to the outstanding. And those are your elements, your standards, because it actually tells you how you're supposed to do it. So this part that we're doing here is actually explaining how to get to that. In other words, you have to include all of these things in the performance standard so that the employee can understand at the end of the rating cycle, or maybe even by mid-year, what it is they're expected to do and what the results are going to be at the end of the rating cycle. Does that make sense? Okay, because I do know a lot of folks don't quite understand the difference between the two, but there is a difference. Okay, so we're just trying to get you guys to understand how to make your performance standards SMART, which would include the S.M.A.R. and the T. Okay? So, any other questions before we move on? Okay. And we'll see an example of this. You guys will actually get a chance to be able to go through a performance element and look at the standards. You're actually going to develop a standard, and that way you'll understand how all of this relates to putting a performance standard in place. All right, so attainable, we stopped off at measurable, right? Yeah. Okay, attainable. All standards should be achievable, okay? An employee and a supervisor should create a situation where the employee has a reasonable expectation of attaining the goal, given the necessary resources to perform at the required level. So, sometimes, and that's why we have mid-years. By the time we get to mid-year, the employee should, if they're having an issue or you notice an issue, you talk to the employee and you find out, oh, well, probably 90% of the time, they had issues with their, the printer, or, depending on what their position was and things that they had to do that was specific to their performance plan, they have to have the tools to be able to complete it, to get to the result. Questions to consider, and I'm going to do the questions because I really want you guys to understand for each one of these, there are specific questions that you can ask that can help you get through this. Does the employee have the resources, tools, time, and support to make it happen? Just like I said, they have to have all those things in place in order to be able to reach the goal that you guys have actually agreed to. Is the task realistic? Are there measures beyond the employee's control? Is there anything that could hinder the employee's success? Again, it could be something, as simple as, maybe a coordination with another office, and maybe they're taking so long, and by the time they get it back, they're beyond their due date, so it's really not their fault. Those things need to be taken into consideration. And perhaps, revisit it the following year to determine whether or not something needs to be changed in terms of doing things with another office, how, efficient it could be or changed. Is there a condition that needs to be met for the employee to achieve success? Can the employee actually get it done? Those are questions that you need to ask. Okay, so example of attainable. Employee will study, let's see what the differences are, because I want to be able to show you the difference. Okay, on this one it says, employee will study the FY 2015 risk analysis process and results, including the GMPR for formula and competitive grantees, and utilize the CPD grants management system. To prepare for and participate in on-site monitoring visits to ensure program compliance, again, with the 75% of grantees. So the only way that this could be attained is to actually, the attainable piece in this would be, should be the attainable. On-site monitoring visits to ensure program compliance. Let's see. Wait a minute, I'm throwing off a little bit here. Let me look at my example. Attainable. Does anyone want to take a shot at it? Because I have it written down. The first part? Employee will study? Is that what you're talking about? Okay. Yeah, I didn't have it marked down in here. It's a little difficult from up here. Okay, so employee will study the FY 2015 analysis process and results, including GMPR for formula and competitive grantees, and utilize CPD grants. So, and this one actually continues throughout the whole thing, so we're working with the same one. So of course, employee, this is an example of attainable continued. Do you have that one? Employee will utilize the CPD grants system, including CPD analysis and GMPR, to prepare for and participate in on-site monitoring. And then it talks about compliance of 100% of grantees. That's not attainable, because we don't, as I believe John mentioned, we don't do 100%. We don't use certain terms when we're writing performance standards, such as 100%, always, never, things like that. Relevant. The standard should communicate how the employee's role contributes to the success of the organization. Questions to consider. Is the requirement related to the mission and organizational goals? How does this align with the organizational goals? Does the requirement have an obvious link to the employee's job, the manager's objectives? So that's that alignment piece that I was talking about, my work unit goals and or agency goals. So you guys still with me? Okay. All right, so here's an example of relevant. I have this one written down this time. Okay, in accordance with the agency's mission to create affordable homes for all and CPD's responsibility to administer grants. Okay, the rest of that was the other pieces that we've done already, which was the S, M, and the A. This is the relevant piece, that first piece up there. And actually on this screen, I'm not sure if it's like that in your book, but yeah, it's italicized, so it kind of gives you an idea. Not relevant, of course, is the employee speaks with grantees. That's just not relevant at all. Okay, time-bound. Of course, time-bound standards can be written within a certain time, daily, weekly, monthly, and or completed by a certain due date. For instance, by June 15, 2017. That's time-bound. Okay. Within 3 weeks, you know, whatever. So we're talking about specifically about a time piece for the employee to complete the standard. Questions to consider. When is the when is the result due? Is there a completion date? Again, we're talking about time, scheduled milestones, or some other way to determine when the requirement need to be completed. These are the questions that you need to ask yourself when you're talking about putting the time bound in an employee's performance plan. Okay. So in this next one, does anyone see where the time-bound piece was added? At the end, okay, April 6th. So that specifically tells you this whole process here is due by April 6th. Okay, it's pretty easy to understand that. Not time-bound, of course, in this next example, there's no indication of any date, any time frame, due date, or anything like that, so of course it's not. This is not a time-bound standard. Some additional tips. Okay, when writing a performance standard, start with the end result in mind. So in other words, if you know what you want your employee to get done by the end of the rating cycle, by the end of the first quarter, second quarter, you have to have that in mind so that you can kind of work backwards to determine time, you know, the relevance of it, all of those things. And you guys will see this when we work on this sample standard. Avoid absolute standards. I mentioned that as well. We don't use, you're encouraged not to use, should I say, 100%, always or never. You can't expect an employee to be perfect. We all make mistakes, so you have to leave room for human error. Allow room for improvement and error, as I just said, and ensure standards are clear to an external audience. Now, this piece right here, to me, is very important because if you have someone new coming on board and you say, okay, I have a performance plan in place for you, they've obviously, you know, applied for the job, so they have a somewhat of an idea what they are supposed to be doing. But when you give them the performance plan, they should really be able to see what is expected of them, when certain things are due, relevant to that particular element, how often they're supposed to submit, you know, reports or whatever. Of course, that is backed up with your face-to-face conversation with the employee to expand on certain things. You may even find that there might be things the employee may be able to give you or tell you, you know, that maybe you didn't think of. So that's, again, why the face-to-face meetings are very important, because it's a collaboration between the manager and the employee to determine and make sure that the results can be met. Does it make sense? Okay, additional tips. When writing performance standards, ensure standards are written at the appropriate work level. So we have here, this is important. You have your entry level, your full performance, senior, and expert. But also you have to make sure that the standards are also written at the appropriate rating levels. So in other words, you know, and I always say, always start when you write a performance plan or a standard, start with fully, because that's where everyone should be, okay? So it's like I said, it's almost like working backwards. You start with the fully level, then you move up to the, and you have to remember the excellent, because we only write to 3 levels. That's the outstanding, the fully, and the unsatisfactory, okay, or unsuccessful. The other 2, the unacceptable and the excellent level, are not actually shown in the actual performance plan, but you have to keep that in mind that that is still there. So if you're writing at the fully level, and let's say at the fully level you want 80%, okay, and at the outstanding level you want 95%, the excellent level falls in there in between, okay? Okay, avoid acronyms and use action words. And I do have a list of action words on page 38 in your book, so you can look at that, you know, later, just to kind of get an idea of some of the action words that are allowed. And there are quite a few that may come in handy, or, you know, when you actually have to even revise a performance plan, you know, maybe use it for a different level. I would say, you know, just take a look at those, and it's a pretty good tool to have in your pocket. Okay, so now we have an example of a SMART goal. Again, let's, you know, stay at the base level. So we're going to have, I tell you what, can I have someone read this, and then we can kind of break it down as a group? Anybody? Thank you. Yes, please.
Utilize HUD systems to process 65% of requests submitted for single-family mortgage insurance records in accordance with FHA policy and HUD rules and regulations by June 30, 2017.
Okay, so do you want to take a crack at it since you're there? we actually, what we need is it to be broken down by all of the SMART acronyms, the specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound.
Sure.
Okay.
Let me just go through each one.
Sure, you can go through the whole thing.
So there's specificity, I think, throughout, but certainly the single-family mortgage insurance record requests and in accordance with the rules adds to the specificity. The measurable aspect is the 65% of requests submitted. Attainable, it's, you know, certainly not an absolute measure, and based on the info we have here, seems attainable. The relevancy, I mean, I guess it's present in it's implicit, I suppose. I don't necessarily see a specific place where, oh, here's how you can tell it's relevant. But, I mean, in accordance with policy, I guess. Fair enough.
Right.
And then the time bound, it's on by June 30th, 2017.
Right. Sorry to put you on the spot
No
like
problem.
that, but you did an excellent job. In the other classes, yes, thank you. Thank you for coming up, too. Did anyone else have anything different? No? Okay. So the HUD, utilize HUD systems, let's see, to process 65% measurable, I believe that's what you said. Specific, we had the single-family mortgage insurance. Relevant was accordance with FHA policy and HUD rules and regulations, and time-bound was June 30. And this first part was, as you utilize HUD systems, Some of our other classes identify that as attainable. Okay? All right. Okay. So now we have example 2. And on this one, let's see, in compliance with the office. All right, does anyone want to take a shot at this one? If this is too repetitive, we can move on to the big stuff. If you guys think you're ready. Think you're ready? Okay. I like that. Okay. All right, so we have a group activity. Huh? Okay, I was asked to read the answer, which I will do. Let's see. In compliance with the Office of, I'm sorry, we're back on your page 27, I believe. Is that right? Okay. In compliance with the Office of Fair Housing and FHEO mission to eliminate housing discrimination, we had that as, actually they had it as relevant, but let's go through the rest. Conduct 70% of, which is measurable, system housing discrimination complaints, that's specific, using the established process, that's attainable, and the end of the fiscal year is time-bound. So the first part would be relevant. Do you all agree? Okay. All right, so let's go back to your page 29, which is the group activity. All right, so using the S.M.A.R.T acronym, the S.M.A.R. and the T, write the appropriate letter in the box that matches the component of the standard you're identifying. So I believe it's the next slide, Lori. Is it? Because you guys should have something that has SMART on the side. Is that right? Okay. So what you're going to do is, as a group, identify each element of the SMART acronym for each performance standard. Okay, yeah. So on page 29, right? And then you have your standard up here. Do you see that? Okay, so you're going to go through that and identify what part is SMART, what part is measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And I know you guys can get this, I mean, like really quick. Do we have questions? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Yeah.
Oh, okay. There's a general question about an employee being under a new plan for 90 days.
Yes.
So nothing we're doing now applies to FY18, right?
It could. I mean, certainly it could. Because here's the thing, an employee only has to be on elements and standards for 90 days to get a rating. So quite naturally, I don't think that in most cases the employee would be at an outstanding level in such a short period of time, but they could actually be rated. They actually can receive a rating, yes. And so the 90-day time frame would apply with any of the performance elements and standards that we're putting together. So if someone came on board, where are we in? Oh, well, let's say July of this year, and they came on board, the expectation would be that they would receive their elements and standards within the first 30 days. After 45 days being on the performance plan, they would receive a mid-year, and then at the end of the 90 days, they would receive a final rating, which probably in most cases would be a fully. So did that kind of answer your question? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, the 90-day time frame is a OPM regulation, so we will comply with that. Okay, so I see a couple of hands. I'm going to ask the gentleman who raised his hands first to come up and give us his rendition on this. The gentleman in the blue shirt.
Okay. It's on? Yeah, okay. It's specific. This is about conference calls, meetings, and supporting documents, so that's specific.
Measurable, 80% of them. It's attainable using Office 360 and not 100%. Relevant program office priorities, and time-bound current fiscal year.
Okay, anyone have anything different? No? So everybody agrees with that? Okay, I agree with it as well. Okay, good job. He was the first one to raise his hand, so I figured he would have the right answer. Okay, thank you so much for that. So you guys kind of get the gist of it. I mean, I know this is probably somewhat basic for some of you, but then, you know, we're really trying to break it down so that you understand, you know, what's required of you as a manager to make sure that your employees understand, because there are a lot of situations where at the mid-year or even at the end of the rating cycle, you know, it's difficult for a manager to push back when an employee says, well, I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. You didn't say I had to have this done by the third quarter, or, you know, so those things that are missing in the performance plan, and specifically these SMART pieces, is very, very important, because that's your way of actually indicating and supporting the fact that we are a results-oriented organization and that we look for results at the end. Yes, another question. If you can come to the mic, please.
I don't really have a question. I just had a comment that I really appreciate your breaking this down, because I always forget the time bound, and I see how that's very important.
Okay.
So
well,
thank
great.
you very much.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Okay. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do, you know. We've been doing SMART since 2006, and we're still struggling with some pieces of that. Would you agree, John? Yeah. John is the one who actually does the audits, and, you know, each year we keep our fingers crossed, you know, hoping that, you know, we're a little better than we were the year before. You know, we're getting there, you know, but I think now that we're actually offering these courses, these sessions will help, you know, because we're, you know, directly dealing with each and every one of you. To send a book out and say, figure it out, is not going to do it. Okay. So you guys ready for this last one? Now, this one might be a little challenging. Just a couple of things I want to tell you before you get started. This is the group activity 2. And you're going to use a scenario that's provided to develop a SMART standard for the employee using the attached template. So the instructions actually say, oh, let me grab your book again. Oh, okay. On your page 30, the instructions actually say, using the scenario below, you will develop a SMART standard for the employee using the template provided after the scenario. So the one thing I do want you to understand is that you are the supervisor of the employee. Okay, that seemed to have gotten a little confusing in maybe 1 or 2 other classes. So I just wanted to clarify that for you. I need for you to, well, I'll read the directions. You are the supervisor and employee listed below, and will be writing a performance standard for your employee using the information provided. The end result of the performance standard, I believe, is at the bottom of your page. Let me see. When I say at the bottom, that's what's on page 33. So that's what you're going to be using to write it out. Okay, writing performance standard, end result of performance standard. The director is responsible for assisting his or her leadership in achieving the objective listed below under supervisor's objectives. And we probably gave you probably too much information, but too much sometimes is better. But also the employee title, which is the Director, Office of Housing Voucher Program, the employee job description, which gives you the whole layout of the director's duties, which you include, which is the employee. The supervisor's objective, remember that you are the supervisor in this case, therefore this would be your standard. So you guys still with me? Okay. And which is similar to what we've been talking about somewhat. It has the measures and all those things in it. And then, of course, it has the strategic goals listed there. So what we need you to do is break it down. So you're going to use the director duties and the objectives and break it down to SMART. Okay? Come up with the end result and the objectives. Yes, for the employee. Are you guys with me? Yes, no? You guys are not saying either one, so what does that mean? Yes? Okay. So I'll give you maybe about 5 minutes for this one, and let's see what you come up with. Okay, so do we have some takers? You guys in the back want to try? Okay.
For this particular example, Pacific will be working with public housing agency, PHA, and then for Measurable in Region 10 to administer 75% of every housing choice voucher. For Attainable, we'll be providing a status report to housing leadership on a quarterly basis. For our Attainable, we'll be in compliance with housing voucher program, rule and regulation. Time bound will be done by March 30th, 2016.
Okay. Is that what you guys had? Okay, sounds pretty close. You guys want to come up? Anyone have anything different? Maybe a little, one difference? No? That, which one you gave me was for the supervisor. Did anyone do the employee position? That was the director's position. Okay, if not, that's okay. The piece that you actually did was the supervisor, and it's fine because you broke it down. This actually is the supervisor's performance standard. But I think you guys definitely got the idea and the gist of it. I would encourage you, if you have time, if you get a chance when you get to your desk or at some time, maybe try to break down the one for the employee, okay? Because that one is probably a little bit more challenging because, as you can see, it doesn't have any measures or anything in it already. So just for time's sake, oh, do we have somebody that wanted to do it? Oh, okay, wait a minute, I'm sorry. I need a mic. Yeah.
Okay, so we did look at it like that, but we looked at it as the director, the employee's job was to support the supervisor and be aware of their deadlines. So we thought we were
Okay.
covering the employee.
Yeah, and we actually had, like I said, one or two other classes that did the same thing. So, but the fact that you are, you guys have been really great because you've been, picking up on all of the different pieces. And when you go back and you look at your employees' plans, our expectation or hope is that when you look at that, you will actually be able to see or identify areas that may be missing some of the SMART, pieces. That's what we found when we did the audit, in that, there might have been some pieces in there, but not all. And every element, at least 3 out of the 5 should have all of the SMART pieces within it. That would be considered the 60%. But just because you didn't do it here doesn't indicate or doesn't mean that you didn't understand, because clearly you did the other SMART piece, which was ahead, the group activity, the first one. So are there any other questions? Any comments? No? Okay. Well, I think other than that, the only thing that is left is that I hope that you guys found this helpful. And, you know, again, the other thing I would like to leave with you before we close out is that when you do go back to your office, a lot of you have occupations. In other words, you have similar positions throughout your organization. And there is nothing wrong with a group of you getting together to come up with the standards for those employees, because of course, just like you're doing here, to work as a group, you can get it done a lot quicker and better. And I would say also keep in mind the questions for each one, because it would certainly help guide you through, what you're looking for when you're looking for a performance standard that's SMART. Okay? All right, thank you guys. Thank you, Robin.
I just wanted to take a moment to just highlight a little bit about the manager's element, the difference. Oftentimes you manage multiple employees. So you may have a standard, but you may have to delegate that to 2 or 3 different people. And so when you're thinking about the standard, you want to give yourself time to review their work, and you also want to have time for the collective to provide you with the end result. So that's the only point I wanted to make in terms of the difference between the manager standard and the employee standard. If you're managing more than one person, just make sure the work is distributed and that you have time to review it instead of giving them your direct goal.